You just have to keep going. You have to want it enough to wake up tomorrow and do the same thing over.
This was me being a hustler.
The only way that I've gotten to this point in my life is to try to treat people the way I want to be treated.
Welcome to Ground Zero Growth with your host, Sam Sapp, owner of Lockbon.
Hello, everybody. I'm joined today with my guest, Janet Munro, former business owner, mother, great-grandmother, and overall fantastic person. How are you doing today, Janet?
I'm absolutely marvelous. Thank you, Sam.
Marvelous. I love it. So, and you're currently local to Nashville, correct?
Yes.
But you didn't start in Nashville, right?
No, I am actually Canadian. I started, well, to be honest, I'm actually British. I was born in England, emigrated to Canada when I was 8 years old, and ended up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Winterpeg, as it's fondly known. And then moved from there to the Toronto area back in 1971, and it was there since then. So that's
what brought your family to Canada?
Well, now that's kind of a story. My dad was an electrical engineer. He'd gone and fought in the war, and when he came back, he was still working with the same company. They put him through school, got his education. And then he had a workplace accident. And the company that he was working for recommended that he sue the place where the accident was at. And he did. But he lost the case. And he lost the case because he should have sued his own company and not the company where the accident happened, because his company installed faulty equipment. So he just got discouraged after 25 years with the same company. And we went to a Boy Scout jamboree, and he met some people from Canada. And he really liked them. They came over for dinner. And the next thing you know, he was coming to Canada with a job.
Wow. All right.
Took us away from all the family that we knew and everything that we'd known. And it was an adventure. You know, I looked at it as an adventure. Came over on the Queen Mary back in 1958. It was their first trip with stabilizers on the boat. Didn't help my mother at all. She spent the whole trip in bed. From the time we got on the boat till we got off, she was in bed. My sister got sick the second day, but I was healthy the whole time, running around the whole boat as though I owned it.
Wow. So in that note then, so let's kind of progress a little bit. What was your first dream, Janet? And I like to kind of set the stage right around the high school, college era, I feel like, because in my opinion, that's when you're 15, 16, 17. I feel like these are when external forces are at their strongest and people are kind of telling you, what are you going to be when you grow up, Janet? You got to have your head on straight. You need to be going towards a career. Were
Not
those
me.
external forces present?
No, not for me. I had no idea what I was going to do. Graduated from high school, average student. Decided I wanted to work for a year to see what it was like. Got a job with an insurance company. And at that point, it was 1967. So computers were just coming in and we had to code all the insurance policies onto these big sheets of paper where you had to put your lines between the dots kind of thing, and coding for the computer. It was the most boring job that anybody could ever have. I committed myself to a year, so I stuck it out for the year. And at the end of that year, I still wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, but I'd taken a bookkeeping course, so I thought accounting sounded interesting. So when I finished that, I decided to go to university for a year and take commerce accounting to become a CPA. But that only lasted for a year.
That only lasted for a year too?
Yeah, I got an A in Hearts, an A in Bridge, an A in Cribbage. So
I'm seeing a bit of a theme here. So the two things you don't want to do after a result of a year.
Yes.
On each, but you committed to the year, so that's pretty cool. You decided to stick it out. So interesting. Well, so you're trying things. When does the first dream really start to develop?
At the end of that year in university, my sister was at the same university going for her Bachelor of Education. And she went her third trip to Europe to a university in France for the summer. And I thought to myself, she's gone to Europe 3 times now, twice to Germany, once to France, and I've been nowhere. But I don't want to go to the same place she's going. I want to go somewhere different. So there was a sign up on the bulletin board for a job at a fishing lodge in the Northwest Territories. And I took it. It was at Arctic Circle Lodge on Great Bear Lake, right in the middle of the Northwest Territories. And I went there for the summer. Best thing I ever did. That was the summer of 1969, just like Bryan Adams.
That's, wow.
Best time of my life, right? So I spent the summer up there. There was 6 of us around my age that we did all that housekeeping, the cleaning of the rooms, and serving the meals, and just taking care of everything, washing floors. And I have to tell you, ever since that date, I always hated washing floors because we had to do it with an SOS pad, and it was not fun. But there was about 14 guys that were there, and they were all guides. And we had the whole summer to ourselves. We worked 6 days out of 7, but on the days off, we could go anywhere or do anything. I got a chance to go to a place called Tuktoyaktuk, right on the Arctic Ocean. Got to take boats out. We had 24-hour daylight. Got to go fishing at 3 o'clock in the morning. Caught a 13-pound trout, which I was pretty proud of myself for doing that. Had a great summer. Loved it. And I knew I didn't have my parents around, so nobody was watching over me and telling me what I could and couldn't do. And that worked fine. So we ended the summer. It was on Labor Day. The snow was just starting again. And it was time to come home. We had our party the night before, and then we all came home. And I knew that I was not going to be stuck in an office, that I was going to go into the hospitality industry, where I got to talk to people. Because my job with the insurance company, I just sat at a desk. It was worse than school. You couldn't talk to anybody, your neighbors or anything, until you had a coffee break. With the hospitality industry, you got to talk to people all day long, meet people, and that was what I was meant to do.
That's interesting. So I'm just thinking in my own head. That's interesting. One of the first real jobs that I thoroughly enjoyed, for the most part, was a cook at a grocery store down here. They had this kitchen, and I was a cook in the back, and I'm trying to decide how much of it was the hospitality portion, the talking with people, the working with people. That's fascinating. So, and I can almost see that as almost like a retreat, almost a little bit. You're doing work, obviously, but you're probably getting pretty close with the help, with the staff.
With the staff and with the guests, because the guests came there for a week at a time, right? They flew in one day, and it was a week later they flew out, and then new people flew in. So you got to know them.
That's really interesting. So tell me about, what were some of the things that you learned working that dream? So you mentioned, obviously, that you knew you wanted to go into hospitality. Can you walk me through some of the kind of the growth moments there?
Specifically from the lodge, or from how life continued?
Well, it's a great question. Well, yeah, I guess let's kind of move into the next chapter off that, because things kind of take a little bit of a turn after that trip, don't they?
Yes, they do. So when I came back, I got a job in one of the hotels in downtown Winnipeg, and I was working shift work, so I was working nights, overnight. And then it was about 6 weeks later, unfortunately, I found out that I was pregnant from my trip up north, and it happened on the last night, and then I had to deal with an unplanned pregnancy. And back at that particular point in time, in the late 60s, early 70s, women that were pregnant were unwed mothers. They were looked down upon as being loose women. Any child was a bastard. So it was a very difficult time. And I made the decision to put my baby up for adoption. Abortion was out of the question. It was illegal, and it wasn't safe, and there was no way I was doing that. It just went against my beliefs. So the following year, I gave birth to a son who was adopted by wonderful parents, and my life went on. So then, keeping that short and sweet.
And That's fair. What can you tell me about what was that adoption process look like? I'm more out of curiosity because I mean, it's a different world, right? I mean, you describe a world where the child, I mean, you said was a bastard. I mean, I guess literally by definition, but also in the difficult sense too. And so obviously it's going to be very difficult for them and difficult for you, and it's difficult in general, but I think in that time even probably more so. Can you help me understand what that adoption process kind of looks like in that period?
Well, first of all, I made the decision I was 20 years old. I was going to be 21 when I gave birth to the child. So I was able to make my own decisions. Nobody was telling me what I had to do. Where a lot of people that were younger than myself that were going through the same situation, they were put in homes for unwed mothers. They were told that they weren't even allowed to see the baby when it was born. It was just taken from them and done that. And at the time my son was adopted, shortly the week after he was adopted and taken home from the hospital, there was actually a trainload of 40 babies from Winnipeg that headed to Minneapolis because there were too many babies being born that had no homes. So as far as adoption goes, at that point in time, adoptions were closed. Once you put a child up for adoption, you were signing away all rights. You had no idea who the parents were going to be. You had no choice in that at all. It was all determined by the social workers who helped us get through that. And you just had to make up your mind and live with it. So that's kind of hard to do right at that time. But as time goes on, it gets easier, because you know that you'll never see or hear from him again. Like then he's come and he's gone. You remember him on his birthdays. You just remember at certain times something reminds you. But most of the time, you just know that he's out of your life. Right? So you have to keep going.
Yeah. Well, I think even I think even now adoption process is surprisingly, we had a guest on, and if I'm remembering the description correctly, they attempted to go the private adoption route, which was, they find a mother on their own, essentially. Actually, I think the mother found them, and they make that decision, and they decide to, make a smooth transition. And the judge overseeing the circumstance literally thought that private adoptions were human trafficking. So they were incredibly against that entire notion. And so they ended up having to go through this big legal battle. And this is a scenario where they're much further along. So, anyway, I'm sorry. I can imagine that being very difficult.
Back then, it was easier for people to adopt because there were so many children for adoption. So, talking to the mother, Shirley, she just says that they had to fill in a lot of paperwork. They had to have the home inspected. And they just went on a list. When a baby became available, they were called. And that was it. So it was very simple. They didn't have to pay anything. And today I know there's rates that are charged for adoption. I don't know how much because I haven't gone that far. But today you have a lot more younger people who want to be single parents. And so there aren't as many children available as far as adoption goes.
Interesting. What was it like? I mean, what was it kind of like moving on from that? Because so normally I might be asking, so you're in this growth period, right? How do you begin to foster that next dream, or do you just jump straight into the next dream?
Well, after he was born on June 2nd, so I didn't actually get a job until probably September. Spent the summer recuperating for myself, both mentally and physically. My sister got married in Denmark that summer, so I did have a trip to Europe to look forward to and went there for the wedding. And then when I came back, I jumped right into it and got a job in the hospitality industry. Went to a different hotel, downtown Winnipeg, a much better hotel than the one before, much better location, and was there with them for probably a year, and then got transferred to an office in Toronto that they had. And so that's how I ended up in Toronto and was there until I moved to Barrie, which is actually north of Toronto. And I still have 2 kids up here.
How was the office? Because they're moving you from hospitality, something that you knew you were going to do, back into an office.
But the office was a reservations center where we took, I was talking to somebody every minute of the day on the phone and booking reservations at all the hotels within the chain. So because back then there was no internet, no way to do anything online. Everything had to be done by manually, right? So it was all done by telephone or by fax. For those of you that
How were some of those calls? I've worked in a call center. How were some of those calls? I've worked in a call center or two for internet help desk, and it was kind of rather interesting, for lack of any better word, taking one call from one person and then another call from somebody else. They could be radically different personalities. One is pleasant, the other's disgruntled.
Yeah, you just go through it, right? But I loved what I was doing. I loved the fact that I was still talking to people every day. I liked the people that I worked with, and that makes a big difference, as long as you like the people. And I was happy. So I've learned you've got to be happy with what you're doing. If you're not happy, don't do it. Go find something else.
So, and how long were you there, and what pushed you, especially if you were happy, what pushed you into the next?
There was a new hotel opening up in Toronto. It was called the Hyatt Regency Hotel, top brand. And they put an ad in the paper, and they were looking for help, and I applied, and I got the job. So I said, okay, this way I get to meet people in person. And it took me, I was with the Hyatt for about 2 years or so. I went from being just a front desk clerk to the reservations manager to an assistant manager. So I thoroughly enjoyed getting up and going to work every day until I got a new boss, and then it wasn't so pleasant anymore.
What was the new boss like?
I'll say it was sort of a Me Too situation. So, and I wasn't willing to go along with it.
Yeah.
So then I ended up on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and then he called me in and let me go. So,
yeah. And
there was no recourse back then. We're talking 1974.
So tell me about nervous breakdown. Can we actually dive into this a little bit more because I don't know, unfortunately, if this is a problem we've quite solved, nor may we ever to some end, because unfortunately, I don't know, problems exist and people are people. But I'm trying to imagine myself as someone in your shoes, as a listener that might also potentially be in your shoes. Looking back now with what you know, how would you, what's some advice you'd give yourself to mentally cope, to get through that position, that situation, to maybe expedite either the transition or, I don't know.
It's really difficult when they're your boss and you can't really say to them, no, you can't do that, because you're going to end up going anyway. So it was just every morning you get up and you go to work and you don't want to go. You just hate the fact that you're going to go there and that you're going to have to put up with his advances. And it just wears you down. So then I ended up taking time off. I ended up in the hospital, actually, because I was so sick from it, and ended up with time off for it. So if someone's in that situation, now it's a little different. This was happening in Canada. So now we have the Ministry of Labor, where if something like that's happening to you, you can issue a complaint and can do that. Back then you couldn't. There was no such assistance. But now there's places that women can go and they can lodge a complaint when something like that is happening to either, or even with the HR. It's something that people will listen to now, whereas back then it wasn't. So take advantage of all the recourse that you have, because if he's doing it to you, he's doing it to others.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting thing, because while I'm not comparing, I'm thinking of almost a similar circumstance where I worked with a colleague. It was hard to say they were my manager, but they were definitely senior. It was an interesting dynamic. And I could never figure out what I did, but they really didn't like me, and they would constantly kind of harass me. And I try to be a likable person, right? And so I'm constantly like, what should I do? What can I do better? I'm asking people for advice, my parents, and they're giving me, go out of your way to get them a coffee, do things like that. I'm really trying to be as friendly with them as I can, and they're just going out of their way is unfair. It was unstable. Sometimes they'd be very nice to me, and then the next day they'd be very difficult. And it's interesting because you're right. It's like you keep wanting to show up at work, and you get in this weird mental space, right? Where it's like, it's a weird concept to quit over one person, I feel like, right? And so you're like, I don't know what your space was like, but for me, it's like, well, I mean, I guess worst case scenario, I'll just avoid this person at all costs. Like, I love everything else about this job, but no. I'm just trying to think through, like, even the advice I might give to a past version of myself to try and get me through that situation. Like, in my scenario, I was fortunate in that person ended up being fired through natural progression, but it's not the first time I'd say it's happened necessarily. I've had a person before, it's just seemed to enjoy using me as kind of a stress ball, for lack of any better term. And
when the Me Too movement came out and it was all big, I actually found the gentleman on Facebook, and I almost sent him a message saying Me Too, but I didn't. I figured it's in the past. I'll leave it there.
Well, I guess, and this is where it's really difficult, right? Because you would hope they also matured, right? You would hope.
You hope that they've changed, yes.
What I don't. What was it like getting fired from that place? Because, oh my goodness.
You know what? I walked home as though this huge weight was gone from my shoulder. Actually, I shouldn't say I walked home. I skipped all the way home. I only lived a block away from the hotel, and I was going down the road, and I was actually skipping because I was so happy that I didn't have to put up with that anymore. This huge weight was right off my shoulders. It was just amazing how I felt. Even though I loved what I was doing, I loved all the other people, and I loved the clients. But just that day when he says, that's it, you're done. And as I said, I was so happy to be out of there.
It's crazy. It's difficult for me but I started singing. When they told me, hey, we're letting go of this person, I started singing. It was like guttural. And they told me this, and I'm like, I probably shouldn't be reacting to this. This is incredibly unprofessional. But all that's coming to mind is, I just started singing. I actually started singing the old Wizard of Oz, ding dong, the witch is dead, the witch old witch, the wicked witch. That's what came to my mind. And so it's just, you get a toxic personality in there, and it affects everything, right?
It does.
You don't realize it, because again, it's like, why would I quit over one person? Yet slowly but surely, it's like invaded everything, and you don't even realize it until it's gone.
But the thing is, when it's happening, it's just happening to you, and you don't talk about it to anybody else. So then, because you don't feel you can open up to other people, but if you opened up to the other people, they'd support you more than they'd support him, and he would end up being gone probably before I would have. So when something like that's going on in your head, you really need to talk and not keep it in, because other people there would have gone through the same thing, or maybe they were going through it at the same time. Maybe it wasn't just me.
And this is part of what I really like about these discussions in general, is because I've learned so much more just in the last, I'd say, year, just talking openly about the stuff I've gone through or am going through. And I don't know, it's a weird notion to me, because you're right. We think about it's just happening to me, and and then there's even these like concepts that some people, I think, poorly attribute to like a Stoic philosophy, where it's like, I'll shoulder all these problems for my family, right? Or, the buck stops with me, the emotional turmoil, I'll just internalize it, and then I'll come home and I'll be okay, right? I can leave it at the door, I can leave it at the threshold. And I've even heard of advice that says, find a marker on your way home and kind of check out at that marker. And I don't like that. I don't know if I agree with that, because I think we're better off when we talk through, this is what I'm going through. This is what's happening in my life. This is what we're enduring. And you're right. You'll find other people going through the exact same thing, and maybe they encourage you, or maybe you encourage them in that moment.
And you talking to them makes them talk to you, and it helps both of you.
Yes. Yeah, because trust is built over, especially in conversation, right? It's built over, it's almost this weird sort of transactional system, really, where it's here's something I struggled with today. And when it's done in earnest, in empathetic earnest, because there's a perverse version of it, right? Where it's like, oh, that's what you're going through? I had that happen in the last 5 minutes or whatever, right? And then it's like, it's not, versus, I'm having difficulties with this. And it's like, oh, I've had that too.
And when you talk to people about it, you find that maybe they haven't gone through it, but they all know someone who's been going through the same kind of thing. And it's not just you. You're not the only one. Especially with as a parent, and if you have children and you're having problems with the children, right? Every other parent has gone through something similar or knows someone that's going through the same thing. You're not alone. And there is no manual on parenting, because every child is so different.
A manual on parenting. Yeah. Yeah. So let's pick up the story there. You say there's no manual on parenting.
No.
So, okay, you've got fired from that place. We're going to probably have to skip along a little bit here, I guess. What was your next thing?
So after I left there, I went to work at a fishing lodge. No, it wasn't a fishing lodge. It was just a resort on Georgian Bay in Ontario, and spent my summer there. But unfortunately, that didn't work out, because I was smelt fishing on a Saturday night, and a boat hit my boat behind where I was sitting, sent me through the windshield. And I ended up with 165 stitches in my face, my nose broken, my cheekbone broken, and a complete mess at the age of 25. So that was a bit of a mess. So that was another challenge that I faced. But that was okay. I got through that. I survived that. And then I moved back to Toronto and went back to the hospitality industry. And then it was, took a while to recover, and it was a bit of a mess, looked pretty ugly. One kid on the subway said, "Oh, Mom, what happened to that lady?" And I thought, oh well, that's what's going to happen from now on. So then 4 years later,
She'd been like, I went through a window, you jerk.
I know. So
what happened to you? Were you just born that way?
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't quick with the answers. So I guess that took me up to about 1978. I was on a train on the way to Montreal, and I met my husband in the bar car, my future husband in the bar car on the train. So that was a good night, actually. I met him there on the Friday. I came back to Toronto on the Sunday. He came back on the Monday. He called me on the Tuesday. He didn't have a car. I did. I went and picked him up, and he never left. And we were together for 37 years. And then...
What would you say is the secret to 37 years of marriage?
You both have
I know everybody wants one thing, but...
You both have to put 100% in. You used to hear marriage was 50-50. It's not. It's 100-100.
What does that look like?
It's difficult. My husband was an alcoholic, but he quit drinking for me. So that was a big step in the right direction to keep us going and keep us together. I was wife number 3 for him. He was husband number 1 for me. I truly believed that I was only going to get married once, and that was going to last me my lifetime. I was determined I wasn't ready. I was not going to be a divorced parent or a divorced person. So you work to make it work. It's not easy, but you make it fun.
Yeah.
And we had our struggles, but we did survive.
Yeah. Yeah. He's an alcoholic and he quit for you. That's a story in and of itself, isn't it?
It is. I can tell stories about that, but that's okay.
So moving along, though, you and him go into business together, ultimately.
Yes, we did. So I met him in the February, and he was working with a kitchen company at the time. But there was a recession in 1978, and mortgage rates were like 20%. So there was no houses being built. So the kitchen company wasn't doing that well, and he ended up leaving it. And he came home, and he said, we talked for a while, and he said that he could build furniture. And I said to him, nobody builds furniture. They go to a store and buy it. And he said, well, somebody's got to make it in the first place. And I thought, oh, okay. So we had a house that we were renting in a place called Maple. And we had the basement, and he set up some tools in the basement, and he started building little things. And he said, we can go to this flea market and sell it. All right. So this was all new to me. And we went to the flea market on one Sunday. We sold one item for $15 and would pay $20 in rent. I thought to myself, okay, this is not going to work. But the comments were good, so we thought, okay, we'll try it again next week. And then we found out there was another flea market on the Saturday that we could go to, so we went to that one. And I always remember that one we sold $150 at, and I thought, oh, wow, this is great. Now maybe we can make this into a business. Maybe we can survive for a year, because that was just the plan, to get through a year until things got better, right? So we made enough money on the Saturday to go back to the flea market on the Sunday and pay that rent, and we sold $300 on the Sunday, and it just went from there. It got better every week. The flea market on the Saturday was an outdoor flea market. So we set up our booth outdoors, even in the middle of winter. But we took vodka and clamato juice so we could have Bloody Caesars to keep warm at 10 o'clock in the morning, because it was pretty chilly in Ontario weather. We did whatever.
That would probably be pretty effective, actually.
It certainly helped. But we had a lot of fun doing it and growing that business. And we kept it going. Well, my husband, we kept it going for 37 years. And then with my daughter, I kept it going for another 9 years. So it's a roller coaster ride.
And at its peak, you employed how many people, were you saying?
At its peak, we had 60 employees.
Yeah. And remind me, what was it like managing 60 employees? I mean, that's a lot of folks.
Oh, it was just babysitting. That's really the only way to describe it. When you've got to manage those, it's just like babysitting. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's fair, but also, like, you can't babysit all 60 folks all at once. And so anymore, we have all these different systems, right? These different books on, like, how to manage, how to babysit, if you will, 60 some odd folks in a way that, like, everybody's moving the right direction of profitability, right? I mean, you need some way to know if all of a sudden one person didn't show up, and, if your management team is 10 folks, it's got to make it back to you.
Well, it was we didn't really have a big management team. My husband so we started a custom furniture manufacturing and retail business. My husband ran the manufacturing part, and I basically looked after the retail end. But that included the logistics of delivery and sending people out on deliveries. And again, remember, there was no internet back in 1978 when we started, so I would be writing directions out for my husband, who would work in the workshop in the morning from 8 o'clock until 4:30, and then he'd pack the truck and he'd be on deliveries until 9 or 10 o'clock at night, because we did whatever we had to do to keep the business going. So I think if I look back, I think we would have had to have better leaders than what we had. At one point, we had a strong foreman. After that, it was a very weak foreman. in the shop, running the shop. So you really have to, and we still did as much ourselves as possible, but you need to have the people in the right positions to do it. If accounting is not your strong point, have somebody in accounting to make sure things are done right. So,
did you ever feel so that to that end, because you said we did what we had to do to keep the business growing? Do you ever feel like you were ever able to really enjoy the fruits of that endeavor? Like, was there ever a period where you were like, we're going to take a month off and go to the Bahamas or something?
I can't say we would take a month off, but we would take a week off, probably about a week or a 5-day weekend about every 3 months. When we first started in business, someone told me that the first year in business, at the end of the first year, you'll know you're going to stay in business. At the end of the second year, you can be sure you're staying in business. At the end of the third year, every amount of money you make is going back in the business to keep it growing. I can't remember the fourth, but at the end of the fifth year, you can take a vacation. And that's exactly the way it went for us. At the end of the first year, we were going to close. We figured we'd go out and get jobs and just be ordinary people. And the business was doing well, so let's keep it going. At the end of the second year, okay, this is doing pretty good now. Right? End of the third year, we were getting new tools, new equipment, better equipment, so that we could keep working, and so that the equipment was better, therefore we could produce more with the better equipment. And at the end of the fifth year, that's when we took our first vacation.
That's fantastic.
That was the year before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. That's cool. So you had another recession in there too, and you ended up having to get creative.
Well, since 1978, there's a roller coaster ride for entrepreneurs, right? There's always 7 good years, 7 lean years. We came up to the one in 2008, 2009, that recession, and things were tough. People weren't stopping in the store. We had a great location. We were on the side of a busy highway. You just got off the exit. We were right there. You could get into us fairly easily. But so we ended up building the world's largest rocking horse and got in the Guinness Book of Records for that. And that was a team effort. We got a number of our lumber companies. They had some lumber that they'd had us sitting around for years, and we're just glad to get rid of it to free up some room in their lumber yards. So they donated the lumber for it. Our employees donated the time. Took us about 2 months to actually get it all together. We built a small rocking horse that we had been selling all along. So we had somebody who enlarged it and came up with the scale so that we could make it. And we made it the world's largest rocking horse. So we were in the Guinness Book of Records for a short period of time because someone else was building one at the same time, and they waited to see our size before they put theirs in. And the only way they made it bigger was they put a mohawk on the top of the horse's head to make it taller. Now, really, what horse has a mohawk?
I'm a little annoyed for you, too. Wow, my goodness. So, well, okay, now I'm worried we're going to be disappointed. Was that effective?
Yes. Okay, so it brought a lot of people to the store. People would just come and sit and take pictures of it because, again, it was right on the corner of the highway, the main highway, going north-south from Toronto.
Smart location.
Yeah.
Well done.
So it brought people in, and it gave us a lot of free advertising, Okay. A lot of the magazines were putting it out for the largest things in Ontario. So there's a large rocking horse somewhere. There's the big nickel in Sudbury, and then there's our rocking horse, places to see. So it got us a lot of free publicity.
So this is really kind of something I want to zero in on a little bit because I feel like I'm really enjoying the ingenuity. How long did it take to build? You mentioned you got the lumber donated from your suppliers. Was it really a massive investment? It was...
No, it was mostly time. Mostly time.
And how long would you say it was for you guys to get it put together?
We probably took about 2 months for us to build it. So we built it all in parts. And then we had a weekend that we set up where we're going to put it together. So that was all advertised for people to come and watch it being assembled. Had somebody came with a huge lift truck so that they could lift up the parts to get it in there. We had a few booths around where vendors were selling things. So it was just a party weekend to build the horse.
So in like a big unveiling, I feel like that's smart too. Do you think it would have been as effective if you had built it on the site over the 2 months?
No.
Yeah, I don't think
it was
so
better
either.
to do it than, we had the rockers and then the legs that came up from the rockers and then the body, the tail, the head. So there was a few parts that we needed to assemble. So all the fellows that had any part of building it, they were all there for the assembly parts. And they sat down to the end, took a picture of them with it. And yeah, it was all good. All good. Yeah.
They say, what is it? Oh, I'm going to mess it up now. Necessity is the mother of
invention.
Invention. I was going to say ingenuity, invention. Thank you. You're right. But I kind of want to highlight this even a little bit because that I'm certain was more effective than some like random billboard or magazine ad. And to your point, probably more affordable. Especially now with so many like standardized vehicles, TV ads, magazine ads, and, I'm sure there were standardized vehicles at that time too. You get trapped in this way of thinking of like, I've got to spend this much money on this sort of thing to bring these many clients to grow at this pace. But at the end of the day, especially when you're a small business owner, that being scrappy and gritty and that, the ability to like, okay, well, we're in a recession. We got to think through this. People, I think, are well off to almost kind of artificially put themselves in that mindset to think through something different, find something different.
Yes. I'll tell you another thing that we did that was really good for us when it came to was when we had our delivery truck and it was going on deliveries. We had our driver before Christmas, the 2 weeks before Christmas, he dressed up as Santa Claus. And he'd be driving the furniture truck as Santa Claus. He got so much attention from people on the road, and it brought so many phone calls for us saying, hey, I just saw Santa Claus driving your truck. And when he delivered to people, the people were so thrilled, especially those with children. The kids were just amazed, and it just brought a lot of attention. So for anybody that's out there that's looking for a way to get attention Christmas-wise, your employees are Santa Claus, and then we had all our guys in the workshop. There was windows overlooking our workshop, so they all wore the elf hats, right? So everything.
Well, and there's this really good book I read, and I'm not even going to be able to. It's an old book. I just kind of pulled it off the shelf at a thrift store, and it talked. I think it was the experience economy is what it was called, if I'm going to get it right. What's interesting is the cover didn't even look like they took some picture and just like glued it on there. But he talked about, and the example he used, and it'll stick with me, was coffee. Coffee in its grounds form is a commodity, and then in its cup coffee form, it's obviously worth a little bit more, but it's still not at the peak of its value until you create an experience. And he gave an example of a French coffee place that charged, and again, this book I think came out in like the 90s, and it charged, I want to say $75 for a cup of coffee. And then he explained the experience, and he was like, by the end of it, you were ecstatic that you bought the cup of coffee with the view and the experience that they curated. And you're talking about a world where you're a furniture store that's creating quite the experience.
Yeah. Well, our furniture store, as I said, we had the first part of it was built, it looked like a barn. And you come in and the showroom was at the front. And then we had windows overlooking the workshop so that people could actually look and watch the pieces of furniture being made. And that was an experience as well. And we did that because where we bought it, the lot to build that building, and we cleared the land ourselves, and we had the building built for us. Just about 3 lots down, there was a big log cabin, and there were windows in that. There was a glass blowing place. It was a restaurant, and they had glass blowing behind windows. So we kind of felt the whole area would be kind of a crafty sort of place. The one next to us was a flag place. They made flags there. So they were all we all had sort of storefronts with the manufacturing located there.
I want to talk about windows overlooking the workshop.
Okay.
That seems like a risky move. Risky is not even, in my mind, a lot of people that would avoid doing that would avoid doing it because they're like, oh, the workshop, there's sawdust everywhere, and it's a dirty and disorganized place. I don't want people to see that. Was it that way, or did you even curate that environment?
No, we had signs over all the tools saying what they were, what their names were, so that people knew what they were looking at. The fellows in the workshop all wore white coveralls, so that they were uniform. They didn't start that way, mind you, but we did that so that everybody was uniform. And yeah, it worked for us.
This is almost like a Disney experience, a little bit, kind of a thing. You curated every little piece. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we did it. Yeah, we were good. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I'm telling you. Yeah. So if nothing else, the workshop is drawing onlookers. So, was there any charge to show up at your furniture store and watch them make furniture?
Nope.
So, I mean, in how many weekend vacations for vacation weekend trip? I'd take a weekend trip with my daughter and my wife, and let's pop into the furniture store and see what they're building.
A lot of people come, and we on the weekends we hired students to work on the weekends, so that they would be in there and they would make it. So we put an addition on the store after 3 years. We increased from 10,000 square feet to 30,000 square feet. And with the addition, it kind of spread the workshop out a little bit more. But where was I going with that?
It's okay. I already have a question. So whenever, how do you cultivate that environment? Where are these ideas coming from? Santa Claus is a driver, a workshop with like labels showing what the different equipment is doing that people can overlook. Because what I'm hearing is basically you've not only cultivated an experience, every aspect of the business that would normally be forgotten as a cost of business is providing the maximum impact. And that's not something every business does or will achieve. How would you say, what's the environment? Who's coming up with the ideas? Do you have an idea person? And yeah, let's try it.
I think it was just collaborative. My husband, he would go to bed at night and he would dream of a piece of furniture he was going to make, and then he'd go into the workshop and he'd start making it, and he'd do it in front of the windows so people could see. So he made this huge table. It was probably 12 feet long, had drawers in it, underneath it that people could use, and then benches to go with it. And people would just watch amazed at what he would come up with, because he was very creative and he could do that. And he could, he could make something that people would look and they would buy it just through the window, seeing him building it. They would say, "I want that."
So was it his idea to do the windows, or is it almost like popular demand? Like, hey, we want to see this guy work. And it's like, gosh, we're just going to have to put in windows.
Was it his idea? No, I think it was because when we went up and looked at the land, we had looked at the log cabin that was already there and had the windows overlooking where they were blowing glass. And we said we could do that, and that would be a draw so that the whole area would become more of a crafty type of place, right?
Wow, okay. So the glass blowers were already doing something kind of like this.
Yes.
And you were like, that's a good idea. We can do that with furniture. Why not?
We're putting a wall up there anyway. Why not just put windows in the wall?
Fascinating. Wow. So what's what's this furniture place called again? Because I don't know if we've named it at this point. And is there still furniture out there floating around?
Well, it was called Munro's Furnishings. It still has a website. The website is still up. Though we closed the business last year. That it was closed in July of 2020.
Okay. Yeah. So there's definitely still some furniture out there.
Yeah, my furniture's from there. And we can go on some websites and you'll see Munro's. People will be selling something and we'll say it was made by Munro's.
Well, there's no doubt that stuff's probably going to skyrocket in value. If I had to make an educated guess here, just with the experience you've cultivated, kids still growing up.
But we had a lot of fun with it.
Because you said when you and I talked earlier, you said that you built, your furniture was built to last. It wasn't anything where they really needed to come in and swap it out.
The furniture will be here a lot longer than we will.
Anybody listening that has a Munro piece of furniture, don't get rid of it anytime soon. Don't. When you need a new one, call me.
Yes.
So, wow. So you closed it last year. What had you close it? Because you said you ultimately were operating it with your daughter towards the end. That's another fascinating thing we didn't go into.
2015, and my daughter took over with the business at that point in time. But we never expected COVID to happen, right? That pandemic, which had us close down like not once, not twice, but 3 times we had to close a showroom, which definitely hurt us. And just the whole pandemic, people's buying habits changed. They shop online, getting things delivered quickly, whereas we're a custom shop. We make everything to order. It's staying the color that you want it, so it's not coming. You're not going to have it the day after tomorrow. So it just changed, and it wasn't feasible to keep it going anymore. So I'm not a quitter. And for a while there, I thought, that we were quitting, but we didn't. After being in business for that long, riding that roller coaster, getting through so many things, this time it was a decision that was made because it was best for us.
What would you say? I'm always partial to this because I don't necessarily think of myself as a quitter either. I know other small business owners that aren't quitters. I know other small business owners that I feel like are in and it's probably not for me to say, but my heart goes out to them because I think we all know folks out there that their industry, there's been a pivot in their industry and maybe they should have changed sooner rather than later. Knowing what you know now, what would be some signs you would look out for to make a decision faster?
Paying more attention to profit and loss in the balance sheet would have made us make that decision. We were doing so much ourselves, between my daughter and myself running the business that we were doing. Like my daughter would be doing everything. She could work in the spray room. She could help build the furniture. She could run the sales floor. And she was doing all of that because it got to the point where we couldn't hire people. We didn't have all the money to spend on employees. So a lot of things had to be done by ourselves. And at that point in time, that's when we should have said, okay, let's get out of here while we can. Get out of here so that we come out on top instead of just praying that things were going to change. Because sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes things are not meant to change, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, yeah. Sometimes things aren't meant to change. Mm-hmm. Well, and yeah, I'm sorry. I try to avoid gaps of silence because it's not really good for podcast audio, but I'm trying to. So there was a question I asked when you and I were talking, and I feel like it's a great one to ask here. And it's what sometimes things aren't meant to change, but what has Janet, through all this turmoil, not all of which we've even tackled here to the depth of which possible, has you keep waking up? Has you keep going at it again?
You know what? I'm 75 years young, Sam. I've got
That's
a
beautiful.
whole lot of life ahead of me, and we've got to make every day count. And all the challenges that I faced in the past are what's made me who I am today. And as I said, I'm not a quitter. I don't give up. You just keep going. I'm not going to sit on my couch, watch television, and curl up and die, because even though we're all going to at some point in time, I'm not quite ready to do that yet. But I like what I'm doing now. So I like the fact that I get to meet people like you. I get to come onto a podcast, thank you, and talk about life's experiences. I love the fact that my plan B has become my plan A as far as business-wise. I do what's called healthcare sharing, which is a affordable alternative to health insurance for the U.S., and I really like the fact that I can help people save that way. And I've started a new project where I'm going to do a podcast myself about adoption stories, because I feel that my story of adoption relates to a lot of people that are out there. There's over 6 million adoptees between the U.S. and Canada, and we all have stories to tell. And it wasn't just me that was affected by that story. It's myself, my son, who found he had 8 brothers and sisters between myself and his dad's side. He found aunts and uncles and cousins. I had grandchildren and great-grandchildren that I never expected. There's such far-reaching effects of all of this that people don't understand it, and we don't talk about it. It's not kind of open. So I'm hoping I'm going to start my podcast. Hopefully it's going to be out by the end of this month. It's called Roots and Branches, Adoption Stories. And it's going to tell my story from my point of view, from though my son's no longer with us, from his widow's point of view, from his adopted mom, his children, how adoption affected them, because I'm sure it did. His adoption affected them and as they were growing up, and all the brothers and sisters and how they were affected. Because I know on his dad's side, the oldest became a middle child, and they always knew that their dad might have fooled around and that someone would show up, they said, but they never expected it to be someone who was older than them. So that was a big surprise for them. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. It's something new, and it's something that can be a legacy that I'm leaving in memoriam for my son.
Yeah. How did you endure that? Because do you want to talk about that?
He passed.
Because we haven't gone over your son yet.
And
he's the reason you're in Nashville.
2017, actually, which is the reason I'm in Nashville. I could say we had a Oprah story, and we were kind of planning on living happily ever after until we didn't. Unfortunately, he was killed on June 30th, 2023 in Chicago. He did audio and sound, and he just got $1 million contract with NASCAR, and he was setting up the pre-race show. His equipment was in a high voltage area, and he was electrocuted, and he was just gone in seconds. So I'm grateful that I had 6 years with him, and I see myself in the future walking on a beach on a tropical island with him, where we get to get those 47 years back.
How did you... I think that is the worst nightmare a parent envisions. And I don't, I know I have some friends that have gone through that. How does one get through that? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer either. I'm not sure if I've gone through it yet. I still feel that he'll be at the other end of the phone if I pick up the phone and call him. I can honestly say I'm not sure if I've gone through the grief process for that yet, and don't know if I ever will.
Yeah. I don't know what to say, because I can't say I understand. Thank you for sharing. This is a selfish question of mine. Hopefully it helps somebody else, but if you've got an answer, it'll definitely help me.
Okay.
This roller coaster that we call life. I think some people hold this opinion that it's like, well, things will get easier post-retirement or something like that. I don't know. I'm already kind of holding the opinion that, like, if it does get easier for somebody else, I don't think it's destined to get easier for me, because that would probably be boring for me. But on the same token, I wonder, how does one level it out? How does one level it out internally? Like, how do you smooth the downs and the ups? Is that even possible? Because I'm imagining a mental roller coaster, but I'm also imagining a world where it's like, well, like I have a friend, I ask him the same question. I've had him on the podcast actually, and he could be going through the worst disaster, and you wouldn't know it talking to him. He's just this cool cucumber. He's like, yeah, it sucks. And I ask him, and it's like, how do you weather the storms like you do? And he's like, I've just been through so many of them.
That's true. I know what it's like. I can understand, empathize with him totally. But you just keep going, You can sit back and let things get to you, and you think life isn't worth living, huh? Or you can just go and grab the next challenge. So I found over time that whenever challenges happen, I've always kind of looked for 3 answers to them as to 3 different ways that I can get past them. And generally, one of them will work and you'll take it, or one of them might be the easy way, and that might be where I am today. But 6 weeks down the road, I might be ready for the second way of doing it and move on. But I've kind of always look at sort of 3 ways to do things. It's the same as when dealing with customers in the store. When you had a problem, say you delivered a dining room table, there was a scratch on the side of the table. Not a big one, but one that they didn't think should be there. So you could offer them 3 solutions, right? One would be, we can bring the table back and refinish that. 2, we can build a new one for you and exchange it. Or 3, we can give you a discount. Gives the people the opportunity to make their own choice. And if you have got 3 choices, then they're making the decision. So they can't get back at you and say you didn't do anything to help them. You did what you could, right? Gave them 3 choices. So when it comes to even decisions about things that are going on personally, that I kind of wonder how I should do it or what I should do, I kind of try and figure out 3 ways, and then which one is the best for me today.
Yeah. And then, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You'll always come up with something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sometimes your first way to approach something is not the right way. And so you don't make a decision in a hurry. You take the time to figure out your different options.
Thank you. So we've been chatting for a little bit now, and I feel like it's time we start to kind of wrap up. And there's a couple questions we ask everyone. So the first one is, so we have a motto over here that goes, if we have seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. It's an Isaac Newton reference, and he said, if I have seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. Who's been a giant in your life that allowed you to see further, that helped you weather the storm?
I would have to say my husband.
What was your husband's first name again?
His name was Bill. Wild Bill.
Wild Bill.
And he was.
If you had one rule of thumb or pithy saying that you found to be true again and again and again, that's kind of helped keep you grounded, what would that be?
There's actually 2. There's don't sweat the small stuff, because no matter what happens, it's always small in the grand scheme of things. And the other one is don't quit. After I had that accident with the boat, my dad gave me a poem. It said, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, and the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, you want to smile, but you have to sigh. When care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. And I've carried that with me since 1974 and lived by that.
You can tell, too. Man, if there was a personal core values, yeah. Wow. Thank you, Janet. How can people connect with you if they want to find out more? Or what's something you want to point them towards?
I can point them to Roots and Branches, contact@gmail.com.
All right. Thank you so much, Janet. Thank you for being on.
Okay. Thank you for having me, Sam. I really enjoyed this. And I'm not so nervous anymore.
Huzzah! All right. Goodbye, everybody. Hello, everybody. I wanted to thank you for listening to today's episode. It's such a blessing to be able to interview some such fantastic individuals. If you're interested in listening to more, we look to post every Thursday at 10 a.m. You can find us on YouTube, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much. Have a blessed day.